68% of women and girls believe if they see themselves visually represented, it encourages them to try a new sport. That's why, to help inspire the next generation of female cricketers and drive further visibility of women's sport, Metrobank and the ECB have created a new photography bank of high-quality images of women's and girls' cricket. The images will be accessible to local cricket clubs free of charge via the ECB Resource Hub, with professional standard imagery available to use across their websites and social channels to assist with the new formation of teams and recruitment of players. To find out more, check the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly Podcast. It's our big fat World Cup preview episode. We'll be ranking all 8 teams in the competition, working out who's best placed to challenge for those 4 knockout spots. And we also have a very special guest, Mithali Raj, the Indian legend, will be joining us in part 3. I'm Yas Rana, and before Katya Witney and Ben Gardner join me, here's Lauren Winfield-Hill.
Lauren, quick turnaround for you from the domestic summer over here. You're now in Perth, having started the WNCL. How's being back on Aussie soil?
Yeah, good. It's certainly a little bit warmer over here in Perth than it is in Leeds. But yeah, good. Quick turnaround, as you say. Not as quick as last year, actually. I pretty much landed and played the next day last year. So I've had 3 days build up this year, which felt like a bit of a blessing. But yeah, first game, first win on the board. So all is well in Aussie land.
Bit of a spicy whacker pitch, you said.
Yeah, it was interesting because we did a lot of prep of, like, you traditionally expect a lot more bounce and carry at the whacker, but it was really dry and crumbly, and pretty slow. And I think we're on the same surface again tomorrow, so it might be a get forward day tomorrow.
Well, back on this side of the world, it was Tier 1 Metrobank finals day last weekend. Lancashire beat Hampshire by 6 wickets with 9 balls remaining. Gabby Lewis scored a brilliant unbeaten century in the chase of 289. Runs also for Saren Smale, Georgia Adams yet again, as well as 3 wickets for Grace Potts. Lauren, Lancashire have been the standout side of this summer for me. They won the T20 Cup and just missed out on Blast finals day qualification. They just seem to have all bases covered and a ridiculous amount of depth.
Yeah, they do. And I think what they do have is they have a quality bowling attack. I think bowling attacks win you competitions. And I mean, they've recruited a lot, haven't they? They've got a lot of players in from various other teams, mixed with a lot of, good homegrown players. But yeah, they've probably been brewing and building for a couple of years, really, Lancs. And in all fairness, they've invested a lot of time and money. They've recruited a lot, which is often money, and they've built it up nicely over the last couple of years, really.
Yeah, I think one of the signings of the season from last year was getting Eve Jones back up Lancashire. She went out on loan last year, has been amazing this year. But then Lancs have had Eve Jones and Emma Lamb as the standout opening partnership in the competition and had neither of those available for the final. So they coolly had Gabby Lewis for them instead. And they've also had players like Alana King playing for them across the season, Katie Mack. That is a ridiculous recruitment.
Yeah, and they've had to invest. Those players don't come cheap. You don't attract quality internationals and various internationals as well. I think you forget that, having 2 or 3 different internationals across the summer is, financially big outputs. And the club they've invested in the women's space. You see that from the whole place, with the changing rooms, with the girls' names and having a real, identity and space for themselves. You see Kate Cross branded all over Old Trafford. You got the hotel with the girls sort of in different rooms. I think it's like the Kate Cross suite. And so there's been a real push in the women's side of things. I think Dame Sarah Story's really helped that. I think Chris Reed's done a great job in terms of coaching. So yeah, like I say, it's not just been an overnight thing. I think they've recruited really well over the last few years and put a nice emphasis on the women's stuff. And for them as a club to win 2 trophies in the stuff is probably pretty good returns, because the men they've struggled, apart from obviously the T20 stuff, they've struggled for a while, the blokes. So it's nice that the women are sort of waving the flag for them.
I think you're right making that point that it's not been an overnight thing. Lancashire or Old Trafford, we should say, were somewhere that put in a lot under the regional system. I remember going to double headers at Old Trafford back in 2022, and it's felt like there has been a big women's presence at that ground for a really long time. And that's reflected in a young core of players they've brought through as well. If you look at the names like Seren Smale, Grace Potts, Liberty Heap, Alyssa Lister from Scotland, these are all players who are playing that kind of under 19 international cricket and England A stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even some of the other girls like your Sophie Morris, they've got your Fee Morris, Ellie Threlkell's obviously a Lancs through and through. So I think they've recruited well, and what they've got is brilliant. I mean, you've got Kate Cross now, you've got Mahika Gore, Sophie Eccleston when she's available, Alana King. Like, that is a gun bowling attack. And I think that the best bowling attacks often win you the competitions over a duration and course of a season. Obviously, individual brilliance can win you games, but to be consistent across a season and to probably do it without your star player in Emma Lamb and Eve Jones was, yeah. I mean, what a knock from Gabby Lewis. I mean, you'd always prefer an English player to be the headline in a finals, but that's a hell of a knock in a final, and fair play to her coming in sort of for the last 2 or 3 games, and putting on a performance like that.
Yeah, 141 not out, Gabby Lewis. I just wanted to focus in on two of those players we've mentioned. So Seren Smale and Ellie Threckeld, both keepers, although Threckeld is the one who takes the gloves for Lancashire. When we were picking our One Day Cup team of the tournament last week, we had a bit of a discussion about wicket keepers and the pipeline of keepers behind Amy Jones and Tammy Beaumont coming through into the England team. For a while under John Lewis, it was Bess Heath who was that backup keeper who travelled around with the England team. But her domestic numbers mean she's taken a step away again. Now it's understood that Rihanna Southby is one of the standby players for England in this World Cup. She battered up the order for Hampshire this season. But you've got these kind of keepers dotted around the country who are doing quite well without standing out. You've got Kira Chatley, who's just had a bit of a breakthrough season at Surrey. You've got Natasha Wraith at Warwickshire. She shared the gloves with Abby Freeborn, Threckeld, all of these keepers, but there doesn't feel like there's a standout.
No, and I think they'll probably become. I mean, if you look at potentially where Amy Jones is at, and then the timing of where that other keeper comes in, I think they've got time to. There'll be somebody that breaks away from the pack, or you'd hope that there'd be somebody that breaks away from the pack. I think for me, like, Rihanna Southby is next in line, because I think she is the best. You say gloveman, but she's clearly not a man. The best glover in the country. Probably, on a par with Ellie Threlkeld, but I think Threlkeld is sort of in and around that setup, and never really kicked on from where she was, and she's obviously batting down the order quite significantly at Langs, whereas Seren Smale and Rihanna Southby are obviously getting opportunities to push their case, and Ellie's slightly older as well. But I think Rihanna Southby is probably the next one that will be in possession. You look realistically, they're probably not going to bat in the 5 for the first few years of their career anyway. If you look at, you've got your Capsies, you've got your Dunkleys, you've got players coming through, you've got Lammy back in the fold. There's Nat Sciver-Brunt's not going anywhere, so I can't see them batting in the top 5 anyway. So you need to just pick your best keeper, and then give them time. If you start at 8, you want to finish at sort of 4 or 5, but you're probably not going to start at 4 or 5. So you got time to work on your batting. I think the problem that Seren Smale's got is she doesn't keep for anybody. Ellie Threlkeld is her roadblock, in terms of, actually, if Seren Smale can easily play for England as an out and out batter, but we all know if you're a package deal, it's a much more desirable prospect. So I think, yeah, it's a really hard one for Seren, because arguably she's probably got to move to get the gloves. And there is places that she could go to enable that to happen, but she obviously gets really good opportunity with the bat at Lancs, so she's got a bit of a conundrum. But I do think if she wants to really push her case, Ellie's not going anywhere. She's a great wicket keeper. Probably not as good with the bat as Seren, and you can see that from where she bats. And she's club captain, so she's not going anywhere for Lancashire anytime soon. So it'll be interesting to see how Seren sort of makes that happen, or whether she makes that happen. I don't know. Like, I think some people as well, you're under the assumption that she really wants to keep. Like, do we know that she wants to be a genuine all-rounder, or is she quite happy, trying to knock the door down with runs. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that you're going to have to offer two skill sets nowadays in terms of being able to keep and bat. I don't think you can. And Ellie Threlka's probably an example of, if you're just one, you're probably not going to get the opportunity that you maybe want, because she's probably been the best keeper in the country for quite some time, on par with Amy Jones. But because her batting is not necessarily kicked on, she's sort of not really got any closer to that England jersey. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one for Sarah, and I think Rihanna Southby on that probably just pips her at the minute.
You say like Sarah, if she does want to keep, then Smale could go to somewhere else where she could keep. It's quite hard with only 8 or 9 now tier one sides in the country. That's only 9 spaces to keep. That's quite a finite amount.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's probably only a couple of options to choose from, isn't there, realistically, when you look at a lot of the teams around the country. I mean, you look at Blaze, for example, they've got Sarah Bryce and Amy Jones. Like, I mean, I know Jones is not around a lot. And then you've got Lancs that have got, 3 keepers, like Lister's not keeping either. Yeah, there's probably 2 or 3 teams that she could potentially go to get that opportunity. But it's a big move for a young player as well. You think of just moving the social element of it, the family element of it, like she's still pretty young. So there's a lot more to it than just going, who needs a wicket keeper?
Well, we've got a Lancs heavy segment this week because the other big news this week was that Kate Cross has not had her England central contract renewed. We'll cover this a bit more later in the show, but Lauren, it's quite hard not to feel for Cross just on a human level, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a pretty savage fall from grace, hasn't it, for Crossy? I think the real turning point for her, and probably the hardest pill to swallow, is the injury that she got in the Ashes and was unable to. Well, we say unable. She was fit and she wasn't selected for that Ashes Test match. She felt like she was good to go, but they obviously felt like she was undercooked. And I felt like that was the real bread and butter. Like, we know how good she is in red ball cricket, and that's almost like help remind you in white ball cricket how good she is. And obviously decisions were made, or I'd assume decisions were made before the 100 as well, which has probably been another competition where she's done pretty well. Not always with wickets, but in terms of what we expect from Kate Cross is control and miserly, economy rate, and just that real consistency. So I think, yeah, it's a real tough one, because I don't like, she's been pretty vocal about it, and she didn't really see it coming, and it's sort of one of those where, if I always think, if you're not playing well or you're injured, of the time of a change in coach and leadership, you might just be the unlucky one that gets forgotten about a little bit, in terms of you've got no form or performances that are really fresh in their mind. And I think sport has a very short-term memory at times. It's the same with franchise drafts. Like, if you score runs just before a draft, you're in the mixer. If you're a bit out of sorts, your price drops a little bit. So I think Crossy probably fell a little bit to just sort of getting lost in the transition of them 2 coaches as well, because she'd been injured obviously at the back end of John Lewis's reign. And then, Lottie comes in and picks who's fit and firing at that time, and that wasn't Cross. And yeah, it'll be interesting who fills the Kate Cross hole, because what she did do in 50 over cricket was just provide a lot of control.
I guess as well, look beyond the injury and beyond the timing, because they did make the decision before the 100 when Cross did take a load of wickets. I guess what England have wanted from their fast bowlers has changed. They've got Filer for that pace. They've got Lauren Bell for her attributes. And then when selecting that World Cup squad, they looked at Emma lot and thought, no, we want a bit more batting than Cross can offer. So I guess she's kind of fallen victim of that changing priorities from the England side. Do you see a world where she could potentially play for England again?
I think so, and that's what I was just going to allude to, was really, is she in the best England 11 right now, in the blueprint that they want to play, with Lauren Bell coming off the 100 that she's just had? No, she's not. Is she a good enough seamer to potentially be in a squad? Yeah. The other thing is she only 2 injuries away from playing again? Yeah, probably is. So, I don't think it is all over Red Rover for Kate Cross, because, bowlers get injured, and often you get 2 or 3 get injured at a similar time. If Lauren Bell went down, who's now England's premier bowler, Lauren Filer's been, injured. She's had problems with her knees. Emma Arlott's not played a lot of cricket for the last little while. She's obviously had a bit of a rest. Like, that could pretty quickly open up there for Kate Cross.
Just lastly, wanted to touch on when Cross was talking on the Nobles podcast, she mentioned the experience of losing her central contract and going into an appraisal with Charlotte Edwards and I think Jonathan Finch, but I can't quite remember, of those reviews. It sounded really scary. What are those appraisals like? Because whenever I've heard players talk about them, they sound terrifying.
Yeah, well, I lost my central contract over FaceTime, so at least she got a face-to-face job. But it's nerve-wracking for a player, because you're under the microscope, aren't you? Where you at, where you going, what the forecast is for you, and yeah, it's pretty daunting, especially when you're at the back end of your career, because you think, have I got another year or 2, or is the writing sort of on the wall? So it's very daunting. I mean, when you're not at the back end of your career, it's basically just a microscope over your game, really. Where you at, how you getting out, where you scoring, where you taking wickets, what's your fitness results like, etc. So identifying areas that you're not good at is pretty scary for anyone, because nobody wants the hard-hitting truth. But it's always good to help shape how you move forward. But those ones where you think this might not be what I want to hear here, is always really tough to take, especially like, you've got someone like Jonathan Finch in there who's been probably across her entire career. And, the other thing to consider is it's probably not a nice thing for him or Charlotte Edwards either.
Well, I guess on that note, cheers, Lauren. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you next week.
So this bit of the show we're going to do in the style of a power ranking. So a power ranking essentially is a thing that has number 1 as the team we think is most likely to win the competition, and number 8 the team that we think is most likely or least likely rather to win the competition. So first, we've controversially gone with Australia. Katya, you are our Australia expert for the preview. Tell us about them. Are they going to win it?
It always seems a bit boring, to be honest. I was thinking before this what you can say beyond Australia are favourites and that's enough. I think it is a little bit more, I guess, complicated's not the right word, but a little bit less cut and dry than it has been before. They've just had an amazing series against India, which they did win, but it was very competitive, and they had that mad final game where they scored over 400. India gave a really good shot of chasing it down. Shmishi Mandana scored ridiculous century. But I think there are a couple of different permutations. They've got a couple of niggles in their squad as well. So Annabelle Sutherland has a sore hip. Phoebe Litchfield missed the last couple of ODIs. She's got a quad issue. Darcy Brown's had some back spasms. Sophie Molyneux isn't yet fit, but apparently she should be for the World Cup. Grace Harris, another pod curse. She's been
It's a really bad one.
It is a really bad one, and it's gutting for her having been named in that squad as a surprise, almost a surprise. And she clearly, it wasn't on her radar. She's out of the squad, and they've called Heather Graham in. It's really hard when you look down that Australia order to think anything but, oh my God, they're just going to beat absolutely everyone. In those ODIs against India, they had 8 frontline bowling options pretty much, and they bat so far down. I think you can pick up on something Lauren said a few weeks ago, which is they have so many options that I think sometimes there is a difficulty in using them as effectively as they could be. It's almost like the sum of their parts are greater than them as a team, like the opposite, which is mad because they are obviously the best team in the world. But if you look at someone like Alana King bowled 4 overs, I think, in the first ODI, 6 overs in the second, 7 overs in the third. And when you look at how effective she was in the Ashes against England, she kind of bowled pretty much all the way through the back end, whereas now they bring her on in the middle overs, and then she's normally done by the early part of the kind of 40 over mark. And I think there's a couple of players like that you could single out. They just tend to kind of chuck everything at oppositions and overwhelm people almost with how many options and how good their depth is. And I think there is a slight danger in that. If you look at that Mandana century, there was almost an element of not knowing which option to go through, which was the right to get Mandana out or make that breakthrough. So I think there is that. India are also very good, we should say, but it would be stupid to predict anything other than Australia as the right team over a month-long tournament with 8 teams in it, where everyone plays each other once. I think it's quite hard to predict anyone other than Australia to come out on top.
Yeah, I think with Australia, the format basically guarantees that they'll be in the knockouts. So it comes down to how they fare in those 2 knockouts. Those injury concerns basically don't matter at the moment because the tournament is so long. Just on their record, they've won 26 and lost 4 ODIs since the last World Cup. They are so far clear in the rankings. But they have never won 2 50-over World Cups in a row. So they have, but they haven't done it since the 80s, which is potentially
was it 50 overs back then?
Oh, that's a good point. Was it even 50 overs back then? So they potentially, we'll check that later, but they potentially never actually won 2 World Cups back to back. The most likely team to challenge them, Ben, are India, who I think have surprised people in the last 12 months. When they went to Australia last year, they weren't particularly competitive. They come over to England, beat England in England with a pretty inexperienced bowling attack, and then they face Australia in home conditions. And I guess the one thing I'd say about Australia is it's not entirely clear how they'll go bowling-wise in the World Cup. Will they have that many options, or will they actually focus it a little bit more when they actually get to the tournament? But India look really strong, and Mandana, if it comes to a knockout game that decides the tournament, she's the best player in the world at the moment.
Yeah, exactly all that. I mean, they're pretty comfortably the second best team in the world. Mandana is, I mean, she was already a freak, and in the last couple of years, she's just gone up to another even more freakish level. So averaging 62, striking 105 since the start of last year, 800s in that time is just mad. She's 42 runs off the record for most ODI runs in a calendar year by a woman.
She'll get there.
So she'll get there, but she could absolutely just obliterate that record and set something that you're looking at it in years to come being like, hang on, how did she do? How did she get 1,300 runs a year when no one else has got 1,000? So yeah, she's brilliant. What I would say is they do have a loss in them. So they've beaten everyone that they've played apart from Australia in that time. But England, it was 2-1. New Zealand, it was 2-1. Sri Lanka, it was 2-1, I think. So they've got, or that was in the tri-series, but they still lost to them. So it's not as if they're totally unbeatable, but they are comfortably the second best team in the world. I guess the questions that they'd have, so a couple of good things. I mean, Harmanpreet remains Harmanpreet, and I think there were some suggestions a little while ago that perhaps there was, a start of a decline. That's not really happening. And Jemima Rodriguez has really kicked on this year, averaging, again, just under 50, striking at, you've got a really high rate, her first 2 100s this year. You'd say there's maybe questions, or well, they have come up with the answer to that question. But I think if you're opposition, you're looking at that top 3. And I think if you're in opposition, you're glad that Shafali Verma is not in it, basically. They've gone with Pratika Rawal and Harleen Diol. Rawal has started, she came into the side at the end of last year. She's done brilliantly, too good to consider dropping her, but there's not quite the dynamism there you get with a Shafali. So she's striking at, she's averaging 60 and striking at about 85. Diol is the one that confuses me a bit, to be honest. She's been around for a little while now. She's never shown loads of dynamism, and her record against the best teams is actively a bit poor. So she averages 26 against England, 20 against Australia, and 16 against Africa, and strikes at 66 or lower against all of those 3 teams. Whereas Shafali, I mean, we've talked about it before, but she was amazing in the England series, been amazing in domestic cricket since she was dropped, done well in other sort of A cricket that she's been called upon for. I think it feels like it, and I almost, the Warriors, it's not happened so far. Mandana just seems to, rise to whatever challenges put to her. But if you end up with a top 3 where she is both having to be the one who has to score big and quickly, that if she then feels like, a knockout game against Australia, she's like, I've got to be able to take this on. She knocks her early. Then you've got those 2 who are then, scratching around to 60 for 2 after 15 overs. That's game almost done. Whereas if you have Shafali who's coming in, she can whack the new ball. Maybe Mandana can settle in, and then she knows she can almost go big every single time because she's got something other end to take on. That would be my main concern.
I suppose on that though, how many games have India lost because they've not gone quick enough? When you look at the India-Australia series just gone, Mandana, I think she's fine. I think she knows her own tempo and she's going to be fine. And I think, whilst I completely agree that it's mad from the outside that Shafali Verma's not in that team, But it's a little bit like some of the selections England have made recently, where it's almost pointedly, we're going to get through 50 overs. We've got enough firepower. You use the word dynamism. They've got enough dynamism lower down in the order, and they're setting themselves up to get a massive total by ensuring that they get through the overs because they've got the power hitters elsewhere.
Yeah, but I guess they might look back at the first ODI of that series when Rawal, in that case, makes 64 off 96. Diol, I think, started slowly and caught up a bit, but they only make, I say only, they make 281, but Australia absolutely cruise it. And we actually looked by the end of that series, maybe actually something a bit higher was a par score. So that is the little warning sign, I think. And the thing is, this most of the time, this is going to be absolutely fine. It's just for those 2 games, or probably that 1 game against Australia in the final, could you see those 2 just getting stuck a bit that then ends up holding them back? And the bowling is really interesting because the batting lineup is very settled, which maybe is also why they didn't want to bring Verma in to sort of shake it up, I suppose. Whereas the bowling is basically the complete opposite. So Deepti Sharma is sort of a frontliner, has played 27 ODIs at the start of last year. No other bowlers played more than 12 games. And they've had players who have come in, in the last sort of few months, even like Kranti Good is she looks brilliant, but she wasn't even really in the frame like not long out from the start of that England tour. So there was a list of 30 players that they asked to send to submit for visas because they thought they were in consideration. She wasn't one of them. Then goes in this skill camp, really impresses, goes in the England tour, takes a 6 for Mandana gushing with praise, saying we've been dying for a fast bowler like you, which is just a lovely thing to say. Obviously, she's quick enough, she's really skillful. She's still learning her own game. She's only 22, but so she had this thing where she'd often start with a wide or 2 wides and then seem to take a wicket. That was like her MO. And obviously that speaks to a bowler who can do lots of things and almost sometimes can't control their own swing and that kind of thing. But she's really, really exciting. But that is where there's, they're a bit less settled there, but partly because I think they have backed, some newer players there. Whereas in the batting lineup, they thought, no, these are our players. And that would just be the little thing in the back of my head that says if there is a weakness, it's if you can get Mandana early and then tie down that top order, and then you might be able to keep them to something within range.
Forgot to ask you about your player to watch for Australia.
Oh, I guess player to watch for Australia. I mean, all of them.
Yeah. I think that's why I didn't ask.
I guess you can't go much further than Ash Gardner, to be honest. I think she could be in for a really big tournament. And then when you look at longer term after the tournament as well, it feels like she's going to be, I mean, she already is to an extent, but she's going to be that one kind of talisman for the side going forward into the next cycle and over the next 4 years when you look at where we're going to be in 4 years' time.
Your player to watch from India, Ben?
Well, I mean, if I'm not going with Mandana, then it would be one of Rodrigue, who I think has a potential to have a tournament that to really add the sort of the firepower to that middle order and to kick on in a way that we've kind of always hoped for quite a long time, or it would be Kranti Good. I think one thing I've got on India's schedule as well, last game of the group stage, see when this is?
No.
If you had to guess though, based on how tournaments are generally set up.
I reckon they got Bangladesh, haven't they?
They do have Bangladesh, yeah. So if they are in danger,
it's amazing how across men's and women's cricket, India always tend to have the worst team last when they know exactly what they might need on net run rate and know what was required to potentially see them avoid certain opponents in the semi-finals.
Don't give a spoiler for the power rankings.
Imagine that, people now turning off because they know who's in. Just on India's World Cup history, it's quite interesting. They've never won it before. They finished a disappointing 5th in 2022 behind West Indies, who are semi-finals in 2022 but aren't at this World Cup. More on the absurdity of that later on. They were 7th when they hosted the World Cup on home soil in 2013, but there was a different format for that, and they just missed out on qualification in a very tightly fought group. Katya, England are 3rd on our list. We were debating this earlier. Not a lot between England and South Africa at the moment, you'd say. What represents a successful tournament for England?
Yeah, it's quite a hard one to judge because of the summer that England have had and the last few years, in that we've said it a lot, but they beat the teams they're supposed to beat and lose to the teams where it's a tighter race, like India, Australia, and sometimes South Africa. Although they did batter South Africa last year in ODIs, South Africa didn't have a couple of players available for that series. I think you've got to say if England don't reach a semi-final, that will be a massive, massive disappointment. But I can also see them viably not making the semi-finals. It only takes, I think if you're tightroping that line, it only takes one or two bad results. And you look at the tournament they had in 2022, where they actually very nearly didn't make the semi-finals. If you get on a bad run, then that could be quite a difficult thing to shake. And if you look, it's also quite dependent on the pitches that we get during the World Cup. So if you look at that India-Australia series, if those pitches are representative, I think in some ways, I know you might have a different opinion on this, but I think it actually might have a worse impact on England if they are massively run-scoring pitches, because I can see a point where a couple of players in one team, like South Africa with Laura Wolfart and Marizanne Kapoor, or even a team like Pakistan, just have a day out and completely outpower England, and the England batting order capitulates a bit, and suddenly they might be out of the tournament. Because if there are 3 or 4 teams in contention for those second 2 semi-final spots, someone's going to miss out there, and it'll be whether it might be on 1 or 2 games. So I think, if they don't make the semi-final, that will be a bad tournament. But I don't necessarily think just making the semi-finals represents a success. There are other things that I think are going to be looked at with England, like the pressure thing and capitulating under pressure. If they do what they did against the West Indies again, like last year in the T20 World Cup, if they do that again, then that's going to be difficult to spin. I think it's beyond just results. It's more tick box exercising. Can we do this? I think it's harsh though, because it's so early in their new era that this has come. They've only played 6 ODIs under Charlotte Edwards before going into this World Cup. They've not had a proper warm-up series. They've got a couple of warm-up games. They had one against New Zealand this week, which was a kind of everyone gets a hit kind of game. So I think it is tough, and their preparation has not been ideal or long enough for this tournament, and the focus is much more on next year for the T20 World Cup and then the next 50 World Cup beyond that.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one in England. It is a new era. It's not a young side. It's actually a pretty old side, so there's that. But I think more generally, I really hope, and obviously we're recording this in England, so we've got a more focus on England than other teams. I really hope English cricket is fair in their expectations of England this tournament. I think if they get to the final, that is an extraordinary success. India are really good. India beat them in England. England haven't played ODI cricket in Asia for ages. If England get to the final 2, that's a really, really good tournament. I think semi-final is par. How they get on against the better teams probably represents how close that is to par. Like if they completely stink the place out in the group stages against the best teams and get thrashed in the semi-final, that's not a great tournament. But if they push the best teams hard, I think that's pretty good. I think that I've sensed that there's a section of English cricket that essentially assumes England has a divine right to be in every final. That is just not the case. In T20 cricket, they've not got to a final for 4 or 5 tournaments. In 50 over cricket, sure, they got to the final last time in New Zealand, but only just. They probably weren't the second best team in the entirety of the tournament if you looked at it as a whole competition. So I hope there's fairness in that. That's probably where I'm at with it. In terms of the pitches, I say that different pitches will suit England depending on the opposition. So I think South Africa is a good example where South Africa have got superstars who could make them score 370, 380. But I also think against some of the teams, if you lose against South Africa, you should still probably get through to the knockouts. If they have a road against some of the weaker sides, I think England's power should get them over the line in that. And actually, they're more likely to fall short if it's a game where par's 200 and spinners really come into play.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that what we have seen is that there is probably more of a chance of one of those teams, like before previous ones, if it was a road, you could just write off England against Sri Lanka or Pakistan or something like that. Was just definitely going to be a win. Having seen how they've gone a little bit, in the past week or so, but also in the past couple of years, you'd say that there is a chance that, Pakistan pushed South Africa in that massive chase a week or so ago. And Sri Lanka have Chamari Atapatu, so if she has a day out, then there's no total that's too big. But I would say, the more reliable way that one of those teams gets an upset, and actually when it would be not even that close to an upset, would be if it is on a spinning track, basically.
Big news story this week was that Kate Cross lost her central contract. She announced that on the No Balls podcast, said that she was informed of that news before the 100. Since then, she's won a couple of trophies. She's won the 100 and also the Metrobank One Day Cup with Lancashire as well. It's become quite a big story. Katya, what's your take on it?
We were discussing this beforehand, and I think the conclusion that we came to was that it's not surprising that having been left out of that World Cup squad, she's not got a central contract because she's not in, well, she doesn't play T20 cricket anymore. She hasn't played a meaningful game of T20I cricket in a really long time. And if you're not in that squad of 15 going to the World Cup, then it's hard to then give a central contract based off that you only play ODI cricket. I do see it from her point of view in that it does feel quite sudden from when she was vice captain in that series over the summer to now not having a central contract. So it doesn't feel like it's been a kind of gradual. In some ways it has been a gradual in that she was injured during the Ashes, so she wasn't really playing, and she was in and out of the side over the summer. But I can see from her point of view why it might have felt quite sudden that she's not in that group anymore. But it makes sense given that she's not in that squad of 15 players that she doesn't get a central contract.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I'm at as well. As you say, recent T20I cricket that she's played, that Ireland series that was effectively a B team last year, she played the Sri Lanka T20Is at home in 2023. Other than that, she's not played a T20I since 2019. She's 33. England don't have a 50 over World Cup until she's 37. Sure, she's actually one of the first names in the test team, but do you give someone a central contract for one game? Probably not. And the decision not to take her to the World Cup, it was a decision that's fair to contest in that it's not a straightforward tactical decision, but it was a tactical decision. They're going with 4 spinners, a seam bowling all-rounder and 2 specialist seamers. It's not that controversial that crosses behind Filer and Bell in that pecking order as a specialist seamer. I guess it's more I think it's become a bigger talking point because of what the media is nowadays, in that it's only a very recent phenomenon that someone who's been dropped from a team has their own podcast that tens of thousands of people listen to. So you hear the human story when a decision like that is made that you wouldn't have done previously, especially when they're doing that with one of their best mates in Alex Hartley, and it's done in a very sensitive way, very different to being asked by a journalist. So I guess that to me, I think the decision is fair enough from a cricketing point of view, but we now just have a better understanding of what it is like as a senior player to go through that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the part of this is just that no one likes being dropped, no one likes hearing bad news, and also there is these things will come as a shock because you almost don't want players playing thinking that they're going to be dropped. So you want to give them backing until they're not backed anymore. And that then makes that conversation feel harsher and more abrupt. But the alternative is that you have lots of players who are looking over their shoulders. And that is also not a good place to be. The only thing I'd say about her future for England it's possible she's played her last ODI for sure. But also it's less the case than in men's cricket, where it's entirely defined by World Cup cycles. There are lots of there are very meaningful ODIs that England will play between now and
series in 2 years' time.
Exactly,
right?
and that is something where you could see actually they want to go for a different balance of side, where Kate Cross, if she keeps bowling as she has done this summer when she's still been very good, she's just not quite been Bell, Filer good or had what they can offer, and she doesn't bat to the extent that Arlott can. But if she bowls as she has this summer, she then comes back into a lot. So I think if she has a really good summer next year, it is not out of the question that she is actually back on a central contract list with those Ashes kind of in mind. But I get it for this World Cup, and I get her not being contracted with the Cricket England have coming up next summer as well.
Yeah. On South Africa, number 4. So oddly, not very good record in the last 2 years. So they've won 12 and lost 15 games. And they've also basically lost to everyone. They've lost to Bangladesh at home, Sri Lanka at home, these are individual games, India away 3-0, England at home, West Indies away, and just this week against Pakistan as well. But that needs to be understood in the context of they, perhaps more than any other nation, don't feel their best 11 that often. So if you look at games where all of Cap, Brits and Wolfott have played, they've lost to New Zealand once in the last 2 years. Then it's just games against the big 3. And then you look at their recent pedigree at ICC tournaments. So they were runners-up at the 23 T20 World Cup. They were runners-up at the 24 T20 World Cup. And they were comfortably second in the league phase of the 2022 50 over World Cup, where they won 5, lost 1, and had a no result against the West Indies. Absolutely blitzed by England in the semi-finals. Danny White scored 100. Eccleston took 6. My player to watch is Tasmin Brits. So she's got 6 ODI 100s in the last 2 years. recently was on a streak of 300s in 3 innings. Ex-javelin thrower was going to take part in the 2012 Olympics, but an injury ruled her out at the last minute.
It wasn't just an injury, it was a car crash as well. So it was like swerving off the road. I think she's done an interview with it, she talks about it, but she looked down at her phone at the wrong moment, basically, and then swerves off. And so, yeah, and then it's spoken about how that shows about how that can sort of, an instant can change your life and how she's changed her perspective on things, basically.
And then when she gets into cricket, really difficult getting into that South Africa side with Lizelle Lee and Wolfart at the top of the order. But in the last couple of years has really cracked it. She's been a key figure in both of those T20 World Cup runs. I look at the overall team. I think South Africa, I'd expect them to get to the semi-finals. I'd also not be shocked if they didn't get there. I also wouldn't be shocked if they got to a final. I think in Brits, Cap, Wolfart, Tryon, Dirksen, Bosch, de Klerk, that is a really exciting core of a team. Possibly light on a fifth bowler. I can see the fifth bowler going the distance on occasion. But yeah, I can see them being able to beat anyone. And as they have also shown the last 2 years, they are capable of losing against anyone as well.
You covered yourself pretty well there.
Yeah, I've learned for previews. You don't want to go too hard one way.
Yeah, they're I mean, relevant to England as well, but their first game is against England, as is England's first game. Exactly. You win that and you can kind of sort of breathe easy for the rest of the group stage. You don't want to breathe too easy because then you don't want to take your foot off the pedal for the semi-final to come. But equally, like, you'll just feel so much better if you can get through that and be like, right, that's it. We're kind of okay here.
New Zealand, Katya.
Yeah, New Zealand I found a really hard one to place, actually. When you look at honestly, I'd forgotten that they finished as low as 6th in the 2022 T20 World Cup. And I do worry with them a bit that we've potentially placed them slightly high in these rankings, but
they won a global tournament last year.
Yeah. I guess that kind of really does show how different T20 and ODI World Cups are, particularly the format of this World Cup, the length of it. I mean, last year in that T20 World Cup, I think it came together pretty well for them to win that. They played some really, really good cricket, and people like Amelia Kerr and Eden Carson, who are in this side. Eden Carson had a really good ODI series earlier this year. They could have really, really good tournaments and maybe exceed our expectations. And obviously they've got that kind of core of Sophie Devine, Susie Bates, Leah Tahuhu. Sophie Devine, who's already said this will be the last time she plays for New Zealand, she'll retire after this tournament. Maybe genuinely the bigger question for them is what comes next. It feels like for a few years now they've had that kind of anticipation of that plaster being ripped off of those core players retiring. And that plaster is going to have to come off at some point, and it will come off pretty soon after this World Cup. And then I think there's going to be a significant rebuilding period for New Zealand. Also, they've just not played a lot of ODI cricket this year. They played one 3-match series where they beat Sri Lanka earlier this year, and they haven't played since. They haven't had a proper warm-up series for this tournament either. So they're coming in quite cold. And below, Devine and Bates, it's hard to see where runs or reliable runs will come from. You think about those ODI series that England played against them last year, that really was the issue. The depth is pretty difficult, and they've got that good spin attack with Kerr and with Carson. They've also brought in Flora Devonshire for Fran Jonas as well. She's an uncapped option. They've also got a few players who've played very little ODI cricket. So they are coming in with a squad that doesn't have a massive amount of experience. And it could be a difficult tournament. I think one to watch, though, if you're going one to watch, is Izzy Gaze. She had a really good tournament series for New Zealand A in England earlier this year. She scored 81, and I think she scored a 40-odd as well. But she's only 21, but she's actually quite experienced in ODI cricket now for New Zealand. And if you're looking at those players who are going to come through and score those runs beyond that core, she's a player who could kick on during this tournament and make that case to be that player who's going to kick on.
Ben, we nearly put Sri Lanka ahead of New Zealand in the power rankings, but we just went with New Zealand at 5, Sri Lanka at 6. Perhaps scarred by us being too optimistic about Sri Lanka at the T20 World Cup last year. They're really good in games that I don't watch. So I see the scores and I say that's a big result. So in that tri-series against India and South Africa last year, in conditions that will be similar to what will be played on during this World Cup, they beat both India and South Africa. That's very exciting. Should we be excited?
Well, they'll definitely be an exciting team to watch, a bit like South Africa, in that they have, in a way, I think, if I've never placed a bet in my life, But if I were to break that duck on who was going to finish 5th at the group stage at the Women's World Cup, I would back New Zealand. But if I had to bet on someone to make the semi-finals as a punt, I would sort of back Sri Lanka above New Zealand, if that makes sense. Like, I think New Zealand
Talk me through that.
So New Zealand have sort of like Sri Lanka have basically like more volatility in their performance is how I could see it happening. Part of that, obviously, you can't really do a Sri Lanka preview without talking about Chamari Atapatu, who is just a total freak. I mean, as just looking at one scorecard, which I love looking at, basically. I think it's the highest chase in women's ODIs back in April last year, when Laura Walvott makes 184, South Africa crossed 300. You think that's game done? And then Atapatu makes 195 of 139, where the rest of the top 5, the next highest score is 26. So that is the total kind of freak innings that she can play. I would say the good news for Sri Lanka is that she is now not their only batter, basically. They do have Samara Wickrama, who's and Gunaratne, who have both made hundreds since the start of last year. And before, it was Atapatu was the only batter from Sri Lanka who'd made 100, and she'd made about 10 of them. Now they've got a couple other players who they can back to put good scores. Silva, who's been around for a little while, but she has sort of, she's not that quick a scorer. She's still I don't think she's scored above 65, I think, in an ODI, but she has found a bit more consistency. So there is a few more players there that they can count on. So I'd say that, it's not as if it's completely Atapatu or bust in those wins that you talked about. I think in the Tri-Series, they chased totals against South Africa and India, where Atapatu made 6 and 23 in those two games. So she made 23 against India and they chased 276. And so you sometimes come in at number 4. I think maybe, I don't know if she's almost recognised that it needs to not just be all about her. So that is the encouraging thing for them, is that, they can, they have a couple of other players, and they have a player who, if she has a day out, like, there is like no bowler who can bowl to her because she is that good.
Katya, Pakistan in number 7, but it feels like they're a side on the up.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we've mentioned that series they had against South Africa this week. They did lose it, so they were 2-0 down and then they won the last one. But in those 2 games, they actually pushed South Africa pretty close. And I think the encouraging thing as well was the number of runs they scored. Sidra Amin, I guess, is the player you would go to. She scored 293 runs in that series, including 200s, and was only dismissed once. So good. I'd say she's in pretty good form.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did score quite a lot of runs. And if you remember, again, in that series against England last summer, it really felt like Pakistan were not even just stagnating, but almost going backwards. But then if you look at the World Cup qualifier earlier this year, they were comfortably the best team in that tournament. They beat Bangladesh, West Indies, Ireland by considerable margins, and there was never any question that they weren't going to finish top of that group. They also, Nashra Sandhu in that final ODI against South Africa, she took the second best figures for Pakistan in ODI. She took 6 for 26. They've also got on the spin front Sadia Iqbal, who is also in decent form as well. So I don't think we should potentially rule Pakistan out of exceeding. Rule them out, but I think they could very much exceed our expectations at this tournament, especially if, that they are quite reliant on Muniba Ali and Sidra Amin for runs. But if those two get going in this tournament, there could very well be a route for them through to like top 5 finishing positions, I reckon. I
think that South Africa series is really interesting because on paper, you're drawn to the game, they win by miles. But South Africa rest 5 players for that game. I think you're right. That they pushed South Africa really close in the 2 high-scoring games before, I think is the most interesting thing. And in the same way that almost no one was talking about Kiana Joseph at the last World Cup, and then she ends up being one of the most important players in it, I wonder if Pakistan actually have a few players like that this tournament. Looking at that South Africa series, Natalia Pervez, in her late 20s, basically done very, very little in international cricket before this series, at times playing as a specialist bowler. But then in this series, she went 73 off 60 and then 14 off 10. So just showing power that we haven't necessarily associated with Pakistani cricket before. So I think, it's hard to put them above Sri Lanka or New Zealand, but they are closer to that level than I think they have been in the past.
Yeah, and it definitely feels like they've got more of a potential to pull one out of the bag than they have. It's like we were saying earlier, previously you could kind of almost say that, a game against Pakistan, if you're one of the big three, or even, South Africa and New Zealand, is pretty much in the bag. But that just doesn't feel like it's going to be the case during this World Cup. It doesn't feel like it's going to be the case that Pakistan will need pitches where the scoring rate is really, really low in order to pull a surprise on a bigger team.
Yeah. In last place, as you might have guessed, Bangladesh. So I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. So they were fortunate to get through to the tournament. They qualified through the qualifier by having a better net run rate than West Indies of 0.013. And they got through in the end because Scotland beat West Indies. And going back to this tournament that took place in April, it was an amazing tournament. You're right saying that Pakistan was a standout team, but below that, it was so close. So Scotland beat West Indies by 11 runs. West Indies, as I said earlier, semi-finalists at the last tournament, not at this one. Scotland beat West Indies by 11 runs. West Indies beat Ireland by 6 runs. Bangladesh beat Ireland by 2 wickets. West Indies beat Bangladesh by 3 wickets. Ireland beat Scotland by 1 wicket off the last ball. Those 3 teams that just missed out on qualification, Ireland, Scotland, and West Indies, I think would add so much to this competition. And I really, really dislike the format that the 50 over World Cups use at the moment, both men's and women's cricket, where everyone plays everyone, then you have semi-finals and a final. I think it'd be a much richer and snappier competition if you had 12 teams in 2 groups of 6, similar to what they have in the T20 competition. The top 2 from each group go to the semi-finals. You'd have more teams. We know that those teams that you'd admit at the bottom would be competitive. And also it makes the semi-finals fresher because you'd have 2 teams playing each other, 4 teams playing each other who haven't played each other yet in the competition. And you've got a reasonably good likelihood of having a final between 2 teams who haven't played each other yet, which is what you want to see. You don't want teams having played each other potentially in the final group stage game, then playing each other again in the semi-final a few days later. So that's my rant about the tournament format and structure over. On Bangladesh, well, they beat South Africa by 116 runs in an ODI in South Africa not that long ago. And that was a nearly full-strength South Africa side. I think the only player missing was Cap. But other than that, it was pretty much full strength. I think probably out of all the teams that we talked about, they're the team that I think will probably be hoping conditions are in their favour. So if conditions are like you see in Bangladesh, low, slow, then I think they come into it a bit more. If they're the pitches that we've seen recently, I'm not sure how they'll do. And I think especially because Pakistan have taken that leap forward, and you saw in that qualifier, Bangladesh were very much in that mix of teams that were vying for that second spot, Pakistan ahead. I think it's probably fair to have them at 8th, but I think if we're comparing this competition to the last one, I think overall it feels like a stronger competition. And a player to watch is hard to look beyond Jyoti, who's their leading run scorer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I guess the thing on the conditions, and I was just trying to look it up, is also just the big unknown, I guess, is how it's going to play in Sri Lanka in particular. So then could it be sort of quite varied depending on actually, obviously Pakistan will play all their games there, which actually could possibly favour them if it does end up being, spin friendly, which we kind of just assume. We don't know that. But equally, like you might have like a team that just happens to play like one key game there, like that ends up. So obviously Sri Lanka playing some of their games there as well. So England against Sri Lanka in Colombo, that feels like a stumbling block to me.
What date of that? What's date that? Let's stick that in the diary.
That's the 11th of October. And then you have Sri Lanka against New Zealand also in Colombo. That feels like Sri Lanka will be really looking at that. This is me almost thinking maybe we need to put Sri Lanka up.
Well, also with Pakistan as well, having a base.
Yes.
Having a base is a big deal in these tournaments. A lot of these tournaments teams complain about how much travel they have and how there's a massive difference in how much teams travel. If you've got a base for the whole group stage, that's pretty handy.
Yeah. And you just reminded me about that women's qualifier. I was thinking back to the game that West Indies had to win by the right margin, and they were chasing 167 against Ireland, had to do it in inside 10 overs or get over the line with enough room to spare. And if Stephanie Taylor had gone 4-6, they would have qualified. Instead, she hit it too well. She hits it for 6, and that's it, out on the base of net run rate.
But it wasn't. It was that when she hit that for 6, everyone apart from Hayley Matthews on the West Indies dugouts thought that they qualified for the World Cup.
Amazing.
So they all celebrated, and Hayley Matthews was stood there going, no, we haven't qualified, we're out. That's genuinely my favourite cricket moment of this year, and it's going to take some beating. So hopefully during this World Cup there might be another moment, but it's going to take some beating.
Nuts that Hayley Matthews isn't at a World Cup.
Yeah.
Absolutely nuts. And finally, something a bit special. Wisden India editor Aadya Sharma sits down with the great Mithali Raj.
If we go back to your first World Cup 25 years ago, what was it like as a teenager? Do you remember the feeling, the magnitude of it all?
See, honestly, because there was not much, the hue and cry about women's cricket back then. So it wasn't like a big deal in terms of people, I would say, the general public. But for players, yes, the World Cup always have a very special place. For me, the first World Cup, uh, of course, there was a lot of nerves because I debuted in '99, and though I had 100 on that tour, but against England, I've not really done well, and so that was my second outing for India, 2000 World Cup, and I had a lot to prove my own self that I belong at the international level, and I came from a very good domestic season, and we had a preparation camp in Delhi. I think there definitely was nerves. I won't deny it. Expectations were pretty high to do well in the World Cup. So being the baby of the team, of course, I was pampered by my seniors, being looked after quite well. And then 3 games into the World Cup, I was down with typhoid, and I had to hospitalize. I had to see the World Cup from the sidelines, like the Indian team's journey in the World Cup. It wasn't in. I would say that those 3 games I did reasonably well, but it was pretty tough to be an 18-year-old all alone in the hospital because the medical situation there is very different to us. You can have a person around with you all the time in India if you're hospitalized, but there you're not allowed. So in a foreign country, an 18-year-old on her own, so it was very, very difficult period for me, and I those were the days, no mobile phones, so I couldn't reach my parents as well. But then in terms of as a player, I think those 2-3 games did give me a lot of confidence, because I think I had a 50 in the first game against South Africa. So I think when you score runs on the at the highest level, it sort of gives you that feeling that you're ready, or you have it in you, that so I felt that after my first debut series, it was so important to feel that I belong at the international level, and those 3 games did make me feel that.
And you started off so well. It was quite incredible for a teenager to come in and do that. So what do you feel seeing the marketing campaigns running now, the promos, the ads? How does it feel for you?
I think it's wonderful. It's great because um, I think that was one of the main reasons also why 2017 World Cup was such a big hit, is because not I would say, yes, the team has done well. The players, all players from different countries, put up their best. But before that World Cup, ICC made sure there were hoardings everywhere. This I spoke in many interviews. I myself, when I was packing for the World Cup at home, and there was India Pakistan Champions Trophy, I think. They were playing the finals, and suddenly, I kept the commentary on, and I wasn't watching the game. I was just listening to commentary and packing, and then I hear the commentator say, "So the next big event is the Women's One Day World Cup," and they show all the captains, the pictures on the hoarding.
Yeah.
So when you're watching a men's team and men's game, and suddenly you hear that there's the next big event is a Women's World Cup, you tune in. I mean, it catches our attention. And similarly, I mean, when everybody are watching any channel and suddenly you get an ad about the World Cup, people who are not aware, who are pretty busy in the day-to-day life, and suddenly you see and hear this, and you would like, we should go for a game. We should start watching. This is a big thing. So it starts of it sort of gets stuck into your head that, okay, we should tune in. So it's great to have these ads going, probably put on the hoardings, and we have some new venues. So maybe they will also do a lot more build up to that game. And Andhra has two big games in Vizag. So it's really great to see all this advertisement for the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned obviously games in Vizag. In 2013, also the final was moved out from Wankhede to Brabourne, and this year also it's in Navi Mumbai. So do you still feel we are missing a chance at hosting these in flagship centers?
Well, Navi Mumbai, I think even the Women's Premier League did have a house full, if I remember,
Yeah.
the first season when they played, and even the finals of the first season, I guess. So it's just the perception, I would say. Yes, Wankhede is a stadium, and a lot of internationals being played there. It has its own sort of charm to it. But then, I mean, when you have the women's game in different venues, probably internationals were never played before. It's an opportunity that the women's game is being played, and why not through women's game make it big?
Yeah.
It's just how you see it. It's an opportunity, and I would see like this. I would see that I'm not missing out on playing in Wankhede, but I'm getting an opportunity to make Navi Mumbai a big stadium, or
Yeah.
probably at some point, get the men's to play there to make it that of that level. So
Yeah.
let's see it that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's been good to see. It's been great to see the crowds in Navi Mumbai, in Baroda also.
Yeah.
Given the eyeballs, the prize money, and what responsibility and expectation does it put on the athletes?
I don't see that, there would be any change in terms of expectations, or, the responsibility that a player carries into the World Cup. The prize money doesn't change anything, at least from the player's perspective, because all these years, what the World Cup meant to them, it will mean the same.
Right.
It's just that, yes, by doing that, you've got women's cricket on par with the men, saying that you are no less. You worked really hard to get women's cricket where it is. It is all credit to, of course, the players for all these years that they've constantly and slowly, gradually have made the sport now so entertaining.
Yeah.
There are a lot more sixers, a lot more fours. There's power game in women's cricket. They are putting up about 270 odd runs to 300, and it is almost close to chasing as well. You are giving us so good close games, and because of that, the top people feel that it's time that women also get their due. So that's how I think I would see it, that finally women's cricket is on par with men's cricket in terms of the prize money and what the event holds for all of them.
For sure.
But if you ask personally for the players, I think for them it would be to win a World Cup. That would be the big thing. It's a pinnacle event, so
Yeah.
I don't think they would carry that burden of, okay, the prize money. In fact, everybody would be really happy, like they would want to get their hands on that.
Yeah. So what do you feel the pressure of a home World Cup would be? And specifically for India, what do you think would be the big challenges for them at this World Cup?
World Cups, first, the challenge is, of course, because you're traveling from different venues, so you're not playing at one venue all the games. Usually that's what the World Cup challenge is, that you're playing different opponents, different venues. Then there's travel. Every venue has very different conditions. For India, of course, it is a home World Cup, so a lot of India is vast, and we have so many girls from different parts of our country. So for us, the advantage is that even if someone hasn't played in a particular venue, we have an international from there who can give a lot of feedback or inputs on how the conditions would be. The challenge, of course, is will be the teams to beat Australia, because I was at one point, somebody asked me like a few days back, who do you think would be a tough opponent? I said I'm still waiting for Australia to release their team for the World Cup. They do have, to be very honest, a very strong squad for the World Cup. And in fact, they have the spinners, they have the fast bowlers. But I think every team will come prepared, will come hard in the World Cup. For India, definitely they should be looking to first get into the knockouts. That should be their first goal.
Finally, from your perspective, if I ask very generally, what do you see the future of women's internationals? How shaping up to be in the next 5 years? And what do you think? What are the things that you feel you would love to see more of?
Well, in the next 5 years, I think we will be getting into the Olympics, LA 2028. I'm very excited for that. Cricket getting into Olympics. Women's cricket overall globally will the trajectory is going up, because with the leagues everywhere, like whether it is WBBL, the 100, or a Women's Premier League, is just pretty relatively new, 3 years. And viewership, when you talk about viewership, when you talk about people tuning in, turning out to the stadiums, I think it's definitely been a huge success.
Yeah.
And there've been a lot of talks of adding more teams, because yes, there are some players who miss out because of just the five teams. So I see that number going higher, even adding few teams. And we will be having under 19 World Cup, maybe 1 or 2 editions more during the next 5 years. I hope India dominates that category as well. So far, 2 editions, 2 World Cups we've got. I can only see women's cricket. Women's cricket as a product is going to go big.
Yeah.
Is what I foresee. Yeah.
Yeah. And one final question: who's the one player you're looking forward to watching the most at this World Cup?
One player, you in the World Cup, you can't really pick one player, because every team has stars in their team. Like whether you let's not talk about Australia.
One player from India.
They've got in India, we do have Harman, we have Smriti. They've been, of course, they've played World Cups before, but for the young players, like I would love to see Richa Ghosh do well. I would love to see Sri Charni do well.
Yeah.
There's Pratika Rawal, the youngster. She's impressed me with her batting. For her, it would be her first World Cup, for Charani as well. Then if we talk about South Africa, Laura Woolworth, she's also someone, the skipper. She's been doing well. This is, she's best in this format. And even South Africa has been preparing really well for the World Cup. And New Zealand, we have Mulyaka and the seasoned Susie Bates and Sophie Devine. But they spinners they were young, like when they won the World Cup, T20 World Cup. They will definitely look to do well in the One Day World Cup as well.
That's it for today's show. Thanks to Metrobank, girls cricket clubs can now access royalty-free images to promote women's and girls cricket within their community. If you want to find out more about the fund, visit metrobankonline.co.uk.